Hello, this is Willard Watson, Programs and Outreach Director of the Blowing Rock Art and History Museum. What you're about to watch is an interview that I did with Derrick Beasley, presenting artist in our exhibition, Ranching Out, Works in Wood from North Carolina. Before we begin the interview, I just want to read you an excerpt from Derrick's artist statement. Derrick Beasley was born in Nashville, Tennessee, and raised in Durham, North Carolina. His education includes a bachelor's in sociology and a master's in public administration and policy analysis. His professional and civic background is in education and environmental and mobility justice. Derrick is a self-taught artist, and he creates out a sense of responsibility to his community and desire to answer three persisting questions. What would make this world better? How can I work to create it today? And what do I need to heal in myself to create it? His work is informed by the intersection of his identities as a black, cisgendered, heterosexual male, his self-proclaimed nerddom, his obsession with science fiction, and being from the American South. Quote, I imagine a world where we are less concerned with validating our humanity than exploring the limitless potential within it. My hope is for individuals experiencing my work to reflect on their existence and expand their conceptualization of what is possible. End quote. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Derrick. I know I sure did. How did you start working with wood as an artistic medium? And was there anyone in particular that taught you?
That's a good question. I think it was, so a friend of mine, Stephen Hayes, who is an incredible artist from Durham, based in Durham, but has exhibited all over. We actually went to middle school together, and then we're kind of disconnected, and then we reconnected when I was living in Atlanta. He was at SCAD, and I remember I had an apartment, and I was like, yo, man, I want to make some like stuff for my house, but I want to make something. And he was like, all right, and so he kind of gave me like a couple of like ideas around how I could do like relief work with wood, and stenciling and using like hand carving tools. And so I just kind of went to my local woodworking shop, and got some wood and got a couple of tools, and I just kind of went at it from there. And so that's kind of the extent of my my on-ramp into using wood as a medium. But definitely inspired by Stephen Hayes, who is a friend of mine, as well as a really dope artist that everybody should know about. Medium at the time, and honestly, that was really, I was really kind of just getting back into thinking about myself as an artist. Whereas when I was younger, that was definitely a part of my identity. But as an adult, I had kind of gotten away from that. I mean, I was doing graphic design stuff for various groups that I would, be involved with. And I even studied graphic design for a little while in college before I changed my major. But that was kind of where my art was relegated to those kind of avenues. And so this was really a point where I was just now starting to say like, oh, I want to be an artist. I am an artist, or and so taking myself seriously in that way.
Do you do any type of teaching as part of your artistic process, or do you teach other artists?
So I did a class earlier this year with Duke Center for Documentary Studies. Mm-hmm. It was not around woodwork, but it was around another one of what I consider to be an artistic medium, which is cultural organizing work. And so, just the act of bringing people together around cultural events or around an idea, around activism, or around, trying to build a better community. And so that is a space where I use my skills to kind of creatively. And so I taught a class on documenting the culture. Documenting the culture was the name of the class. And we talked about kind of the intersection of like personal ethics and politics, and how to work in community in a way that's responsible, while bringing some kind of creative event to life with community. And so that has been kind of where most of my teaching has taken place in terms of helping people to create their own types of events or efforts, you know.
You said your work is kind of wood. You said relief work with wood. Is that how you would kind of classify your type of woodwork? Or
You know, I've long been at a search to describe like what the method is, and so I've used that because I guess historically in my practice I'll take a piece and then and then I'm excavating the wood wood out to make an image rather than putting something on it. And so I think that's been what I've used to describe it. Even though I've since kind of gotten into more sculptural pieces and things with even more dimension, where I'm using different power tools and things to really like shape the wood in the way that I want. And so I think that's the best way I could think to describe that method. And woodwork is you think of that more as a craft, or as a in the construction context or furniture context. And so I don't ever really feel like that actually captures what I'm aiming to do, even though I enjoy building structural things as well, especially in doing installation work. And so that would maybe be closer to woodwork. And this is just me using, I just use wood as a medium. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
projects.
Definitely. And what you said has been echoed in the other conversations that I've had with the other artists and people that come at it from more of, wood is the medium that they use to achieve their visualization they have in their mind. Others came from it from, they made cabinets and they wanted to make something a little more exciting, or they had a fine art background, but they liked the constraints that furniture and function put on their work. So it's really like a nice mix that we have of people that are like trained bowl turners or traditional furniture makers, to people with, that more of an outsider experience when approaching the artistic medium. So it's nice to, I like having these shows that are all focused on one medium, because then you get to see the variety of expression through that one source.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I feel like from my experience, most shows will have a theme that's not the medium is not the theme.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's cool that the medium was a theme for that, because you do get to explore. I love design in all forms, and so from furniture to architectural design, and so I really regret that I wasn't able to come to the show. COVID kind of changed all of our plans, didn't it? But I'm sure it was pretty cool to have all of those different forms of woodwork in one space, kind of having in conversation.
Oh, definitely in conversation with each other. And I mean, it was nice for a couple months because it was for it to be a private exhibition for the staff here, because there was a period of time where we were still working in the office, but we weren't able to have our doors open to the public. So and COVID hit right before this show was going to open. So, but it has been nice, the responses we've gotten from people that have been able to tour through the exhibit since we've been able to be open to the public again. And it's continuing these conversations about where does that line between craft and art begin? And especially, I feel like with wood compared to other mediums, it's one that is a little bit hard to distinguish.
Yeah.
So then, so like my next question was just about North Carolina having a history of furniture making. And, was that a factor for you to work in the state? And then, or has your time in North Carolina shaped or influenced your work at all?
Definitely so. I'm from Durham. I grew up here, brother. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. I moved here when I was very little. So I think just by virtue of being here as a child, yes. As far as the furniture industry specifically, probably not. I haven't had any real exposure to that outside of having gone to school in Greensboro in North Carolina A&T and being in proximity to like High Point, where you always kind of see that, but never really was like intimately in relationship with that type of work or that industry. I think if we want to get a little more, more meta with it, I guess, I think my love for using wood as a medium is definitely tied to my love for the environment. And I think, the idea of using something that's from the natural world, I think is exciting for me. And some of my more conceptual work and installation work has really been around like asking the question of what happens as we get as human existence and that the natural world and technology become closer and closer. And so that's something I've been in continued conversation with maybe in the last couple of years through my art. And I think using wood as a medium, using other natural objects as a medium is part of trying to tell stories or try to create possibilities through my art around what like a world where we are closer to technology, but not necessarily further away from our humanity. And so that's, I would say that's maybe the impact and the connection for me to using wood and thinking about the connections between the natural world and kind of where we're going technologically.
Yeah, and I love how you put that. So we can be closer to technology, but not further away from our humanity. And that sometimes it seems that furthering our technological abilities as a society and protecting the environment, that they're put in opposition to each other. But it can be a both and it really needs to be for the most people to benefit. So that's what my background's in: sustainability and sustainable development, looking at community development from that lens. And then I got into the arts more later on. But so what you're saying definitely resonates with me. And a lot of these views that people have for the future can often not be equitable and not really work for the most. So how can we make sure everybody gets a place at the table? And so the next one, so the next question I have is, when do you choose to follow traditions and when do you choose to experiment? And have you made any traditional practices your own? Like you alluded to, like, you went to a local like hardware store to get your woodworking tools, right? So it's kind of like, I guess those traditional tools are how you can stick in tradition, but you kind of came from it from a more outsider artist perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think because I find myself in lows a lot and using so because I think let me back up. I feel like my work is kind of meeting in the middle where I have this more abstract wood stuff and like, graphic design stuff and photography stuff. And then I have like this installation work where I'm building more of a like structure to hold or to frame the work. And so I feel like my work has been coming more towards the center where the installation is more of the art, if that makes sense. And so to that point, I think I find myself using a lot of traditional materials, whether it's just like plywood that's really easily found, or 2x4s, and kind of pulling them together with, and I might use like, you might see it at first, it just looks like, oh, is he putting a cabinet together? Like, and so I think from that perspective, yes, like I kind of start from it might look very traditional in the beginning. as if I'm building something with functional utility. And then it becomes a more abstract expression as I, pull it, then I start to kind of pull it away or pull material away from the object. And so, yeah, and honestly, if you look at my YouTube scrolls, it's less art and more DIY. And I think that's where I really get more of my inspiration, and kind of to the point around sustainable development, like in thinking about, I've been thinking a lot about landscape and gardens, and I know there's a connection coming soon to where I'm thinking about how like we as humans engage with our natural environment, and what structures and art can do to bring us closer. There's a cool episode of Abstract on Netflix. It's like I don't know if you've seen that show.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a woman who is the head of the design of a design school within MIT, and she talks about the use of natural materials as the building blocks for structures. And I think that they one example was like they use a silkworm to they use like thousands of silkworms to build a web around this dome structure, and its strength was that of what we might find in synthetic materials, and that was really fascinating to me. And I think that's definitely a direction I feel myself headed in, thinking about the use of materials and sustainable materials to create work, and to help us get closer to our environment as opposed to building more structures to remove us from it. So.
Mm-hmm. And something else that's popped out to me is like you're talking about you're building this what looks like a cabinet or something more like a traditional furniture form, but then you were kind of taking pieces away. And you've also kind of talked about that in like the relief work where you're like excavating pieces from this to reveal something that's there. You know? So I could, is that like, could you talk about that a little more? Because I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah. So, one of my personal kind of mantras is just that we have all we need to be free. And that concept kind of just comes from the idea of we don't have to actually go in search of something magical to to find liberation, or to find nirvana or whatever. Like we have the tools and the capacity to do what we need and to be who we need to be free. And so I think that process of excavation is really mimicking like this looking inward, like you were saying earlier, like looking into yourself, or like navigating the dark places that you have yet to uncover, to really find the stuff that's already there, but to really find and gain better understanding of like who you are, who you want to be, or what's possible in the community, and so that like you were saying, like that idea of taking of like just uncovering and excavating to discover, as opposed to feeling like we have to create something new, or that we have to like add more. The idea of always needing more to be well, or to find peace or happiness or whatever, or and there's definitely a connection just to trying to combat. There's like a commentary around materialism and like consumerism. The idea that we need to always be adding something or purchasing something, and I gotta admit I've been guilty of it during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on Facebook Marketplaces looking like, what are y'all getting rid of today, and what can I?
Mm-hmm.
So I can do more, but so I'm not saying that I'm so evolved to be immune to that, but that's an idea that I'm definitely aware of, and those are ideas I'm aware of and trying to combat, and I think some of my methods echo that sentiment.
But yeah, that's definitely awesome, and I think you convey those sentiments that you express well in your art, and I know it's just like not good to like tell an artist what their art means to you, get their impression from them, but
No, I actually prefer that because, you know, I have my own ideas, but I feel like once I've made it, it is what it is. And I've already gotten, like, the work to me, like, I've already done the work of, like, you know, toiling with my emotions and all of this stuff to, like, make the piece.
Mm-hmm.
So at a certain point, you got to release that stuff, and, you know, and I enjoy hearing what other people who are, I enjoy that people engage with it in general. And so I love to hear what people think, and what it makes them feel, or ask them, you know, and what is your response? What does it make you feel? Because to me, that's the point. I'm making it for my own healing. And if it helps somebody else to, you know, think more deeply about something, yeah, dope. I want to know. You know.
Mm-hmm. That's fun. Okay, so while we're on deep topics, so wood's historically associated with men, and just with art in general, the issues of gender and race in art making are a recurring topic. So do you see similar issues facing wood artists, or have you experienced that in your own time as an artist?
You know, I don't know that I'm in community enough with other wood artists to have a definitive answer around that. But I think, I mean, I think on his nose, I would say, yeah, definitely, you know, race, gender, class, all of those things impact, like, our perception of what's accessible to us. And wood being heavy and hard, you know, to work with, you know, I feel like there's definitely some gender norms around, you know, who chooses to work with wood, or who feels like they have access to work with that medium, I think. But, you know, what I've discovered, one, you know, you know, I think there's you know, with the tools that I use, I don't know that my maleness, my manliness has any actual benefit to me using the medium. You know, I just like it, and so I know one of my studio mate, Mary Stein. She doesn't necessarily work with wood, but she works with a lot of materials, whether it's like Ziploc bags or, you know, to concrete and clay and really large scale. And so, you know, seeing how, you know, we both have a show at Art Space in Raleigh right now. And she's got these huge sculptures of, like, mixed media. And I think, you know, it's kind of inspiring just to see, you know, well, you know, she's just not deterred by scale or weight or the norms around, you know, who should be used at what medium, and that's pretty cool. I think I kind of got lost in your question, but baseline, I don't know that I'm in community enough with enough wood artists to know to be able to have visualized that disparity, but I can imagine that it does exist. Yeah.
Yeah, so just again, your answer echoed what I'd heard with other people. The big echo, though, is like, I'm not in community enough with other artists to speak on that. Everybody else I talk to is like, look, I spend all my time in my shop. And, like, the only time I'm around other artists really is, like, when I come to shows.
Yeah.
And then how, like, well, we've all been really limited with that experience so far. But so it,
so you kind of got me thinking about something, and so I experienced this in sometimes when I'm at, like, the hardware store, right? That's a very, in many ways, toxically male environment, and or toxically masculine environment. And I think, and I witness the difference of way people engage with me versus how they engage with my partner when she's in there with me, you know. So I think it's one of those, or even with how people engage with me when they think that I don't know what I should know, you know, or, you know, they judge your car, your truck, or whatever, like on a scale of 1 to manly, you know. And so it's like, I think, you know, it could be easy to be discouraged or feel like, you know, that's not a space for you sometimes in those environments, or you know, I might buy 2 sheets of plywood, and then people are like, what are you doing with that? Kind of, it's like, I'm making art. I don't know, like, what do you care? You know, I don't know. And so it's always interesting as an artist being in those spaces, and, you know, the collection of materials that I might have in my cart don't seem to actually go together. If I'm asking a question, they're like, oh, well, you definitely want to do this. And I'm like, well, I don't actually need this trim to match like a house. I'm trying to get it to do this. And so, I don't know, sometimes using wood as a medium, I find myself like, where is the actual wood artist store?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go to Jerry,
Yeah.
it's all paint, you know, you go to the woodworking shop and they're trying to tell you how to make it look aesthetically like a cabinet. You know, it's just, there is no real home, I think, for the wood artist to find
Mm-hmm.
a natural community in some way.
Oh yeah, and I think it's you spoke to it too. It's like, what are you doing with that? You know, and
Yeah,
people have these preconceptions of like what you should do with those materials
yeah,
instead of what you're able to do. And the anecdote about your shopmate was really nice, because it's where, you know, she's not afraid to just do whatever she wants and to create for the sake of creating,
yeah,
and to not be deterred by that. And it can really be unfortunate when someone's wings get clipped by that because someone makes an offhand comment, or, you know, being judged by who they are and who should be in what space.
yeah,
It it is nice that of the, like in our show, of the educators that we have, you know, they're the one with like the most renown that's an arts educator in the exhibit is a woman, and she's the, like, does traditional furniture, American furniture designs. And so and is the shop manager over at the Penland School of Craft in Spruce Pine. So it's really, you know, it's nice that we have kind of representations of different walks of life and different entrances into the medium and into the art world. Because yeah, it is just something with who makes art, who's allowed to make art, where is their art shown, who's buying the art, right, who's commissioning it, yeah, all those. So do you have a favorite wood or material to work with?
So you said wood or material. I think more recently I've been playing with charcoal. I did a photo shoot with my studio mate last year sometime, and I remember there was somebody had burned a stump, I think, or, you know, so there was all of these like pieces of charcoal, blackened like charcoal, and you know, and it was like, oh wait, this is wood too, like. And so in my most recent show, I did a lot of charcoal, or some charcoal work, and that was fun to be doing that, but still know that I'm like using wood, and so that, you know, I think, but more specifically, I've been enjoying using plywood because of the way you can layer it, and it have this, and then when you cut it back, it almost looks like rings in a tree, and because it's so sturdy, but then it's also really heavy. So I would say those right now are kind of what I'm really enjoying. I want to get more into like found and reclaimed wood, and see what I can create from those items, but that's not always accessible or cheap. Sometimes it's easier to go get your dimensional lumber, and you kind of, but I'm also excited to get more into like what you were saying about the constraints of the material or the medium, and so thinking about like what if I find something, what can I do with it? My partner's great uncle makes these incredible staffs out of, what he'll do is find like a root and cut it up and then dry it, and then it dries and it hardens into a staff. And to me, and then he would like kind of carve into making and kind of refine the shape a little. And that's such a dope process to me, because like there's art in the selection of the root, you know, or the vine. And then there's also art in like what do you choose to take away from it to make it its own shape. So really been inspired by his process with that, and thinking about like, but I don't know that he would categorize himself as like a sustainable artisan necessarily. That's just his process, and I think that's really cool that that's just his process, you know. And it really challenges in a lot of ways. I mean, it's kind of subversive, and it challenges the ideas around particularly Black folks and like environmentalism, you know. And you know, that's an inspiring thing, and that's one of those things that just reminds me like we already have these tools, and these things are already a part of our traditions, and we just have to reclaim them, you know.
Man, I mean, I just think there's something so powerful about using a root for a walking stick too, and for it's something. I mean, it's a way to use the past to move forward.
Yeah.
Right. And that is just like very powerful in itself. And then to, you know, embellish it with carvings and to, you know, really take time to transform the root into something that's beautiful and powerful, and then use it to like help you move forward into the future. Like that is really speaks to me. Okay. So the last question I have is if you could just talk about the pieces that you have in the museum as part of the branching out.
Yeah. So, you know, those both pieces are, for me, were kind of some of my, honestly, my first, so when I first started doing relief work, I would do kind of renderings of images, like I kind of iconic images of artists that I like, and that was kind of how I first got into using using wood as a medium. Not really expressing any original ideas necessarily, you know, other than like the method. And so, you know, the two pieces that I have in the show are really the first in which I really started to like try to manifest some of my own ideas into the medium and get a little more abstract with it. And so both of those are in some ways, like the one picture here, really this was the first one where I was like, oh, one I always called this a selfie, because it feels, you know, it was very much like an idea that I had, a way that I feel around, you know, whether it's processing the weight of the world or the state of our socio-political climate, or whether it's just, you know, the weight of emotions that come with being a human being, you know, I think, and being a guy that's always in my head. And so this is really expressive of me trying to manifest the ideas that I have. And so with this being the first carving that I've done, of like where there was abstract on this medium, I think it really helped. This is really a special piece for me that I don't know that I'll ever sell. I've kind of tried to sell it, you know, you know, you can price something really high and like, ain't nobody buying that. And I've had a couple of scares where people were like, oh, well, and so, you know, it was kind of not my first piece, but a first piece of its kind, and definitely a piece that was transformative for me in terms of my own process and practice. Like, oh, like I can make dope shit from my own ideas, and I don't have to be afraid to do that. So this one means a lot. I know the on the nose kind of description of it was, or the more straightforward description, I guess, was just the juxtaposition of the guy with the goals in his mouth with this kind of metaphysical manifestation of energy and ideas. For me was also a way of kind of subverting ideas around who can claim greatness, or who can claim, big ideas, and who can create things that last forever, who can, dream of universes and possibilities and radical possibilities. Like, who does that belong to? And I think, to me, this was a way to kind of challenge the ideas around like who we think as being worthy of being able to manifest big ideas.
Yeah, man, that is awesome. I'm definitely there with you 100%. And yeah, and love the gold teeth being in there. And then it is just like that subtle subversion there. So then if we could talk about the other piece.
Yeah. This is an interesting piece that like I have so many mixed feelings about. This was kind of after I made this after the last piece. But one of the things I used to kind of map my work before I would carve it. So I would have a pretty elaborate like mapping of like where I wanted to take out. And with this one, I remember having just drawn straight on the wood. Without doing like a digital rendering or without, really doing that first. And so I remember feeling very like self-conscious around it and all of these different feelings. But I think it was kind of just a kind of an iteration of the last idea. And I remember, but just this idea of feeling fragmented and feeling broken apart. Like the more information you kind of gather, the more you understand, the more sometimes it can kind of break you down, or you feel the weight of it, or you feel like the more you know, the more responsibility you have, or the more, just the more weight you can feel around, existence. And so that was kind of what this was speaking to for me, along some of the same lines of the last piece. And this was the largest piece at the time that I had done, with it being 4 foot by 4 foot. And I think, which you can't really tell in this picture, how the scale, I should have put a penny or something in there. But, so this was, in addition to like what it is as a piece of art, for me, it was also another kind of step towards trying to make something using less, like giving myself less control. Like, so like, all right, don't render it digitally, don't do X, Y, Z, and like, just make it, and kind of allow yourself to go with it. And so that was really fun. And I think this piece has been catalytic to a lot of other work that I've done, where I've kind of trusted my own creativity. As much as sometimes this piece feels good and sometimes it doesn't, and so as an artist, that's just how it is, I think. But I think so I had it in a show that I had recently, and I wasn't going to include it, and I included it because I needed more woodwork. And then there was a cool response to it, so I was like, you know what, I can have a way to feel about this, but I don't have to hide or be ashamed for whatever reason that I think, because it doesn't meet some standard of what I think is good. If other people have a response to it, then I might as well share it, and allow other people to like get something from it, even if I don't feel like I get as much from it, And I think, to me, that's another part of like letting go of your art and being willing to like release it in a way after you make it. It's like, all right, well, I already got this piece did a lot for me in the process of making it, and I can let it go.
Mm-hmm.
If I could do this earlier, I probably would have used the angle grinder. I think I did this all by hand. And so
yeah, I really like how rough a lot of the gouges kind of are, and how the texture. I mean, there's so much depth to it, and the layers. How, since you use kind of like a plywood, or so since there are the different layers of wood and the grains going in different directions, and I just spent so much time really with all the spaces in between, and there's so much texture to it, but yeah, the depth to it, and how it is rough, but how a lot of this of like, you know, this becoming isn't a smooth experience all the time. And I like that you said too that, you know, you had to step back and separate your own feelings from the piece because other people felt things for it, and sometimes you just got to let it live and be out there.
Yeah. 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 And I think, you know, every artist has that feeling of like, this doesn't meet my standard of whatever. But I think sometimes you just got to let that stuff go, man, and just kind of get out your own head about it, get out your own way. And I was talking with my partner yesterday around that. We were just kind of discussing the idea of like iterating and making more, and not letting the fear of making something that's whack keep us from making, because you need that whack as a step to the good. That one of my favorite writers, Octavia Butler, said about her own work is not that she's like, she never had like something that she went to, and I'm paraphrasing, for great ideas, but just that like, but the act of like writing all the time got her to good ideas. And so, you know, you're not gonna, if you're looking for divine inspiration, you know, that might not come in the form of a spark. It might come more in the form of a process. And so, you know.
Definitely process. That's what it was. That piece, the last piece we're just looking at, really speaks to me about that process. And